1AC represents a normativity of access to debate in a piecemeal form to help those that are here but has already precluded access of individuals to space. This is represented by the systems of neoliberal inclusion that uphold systems of productivity academy. Even though they say they don't support status quo debate practices and debate, their form of liberal inclusion pauses debate right around the able-bodied understanding of disability from an outsider's view. The fact that another person has to become disabled before they can have a chance of understanding what it means to become disabled means they're excluding our view and always positing outside that their form of inclusion is something that happens afterwards. It's something that happens to them. The Fritz evidence is indicative that the neoliberal practices use forms of inclusion to show how good we are. We use these things to say that we're inclusive. We don't have to go any farther. The inclusive nature of the 1AC leads the team saying how good quiet rooms are and how things good are for UNLV BS, but for the rest of the disabled community, it's very difficult for individuals to talk about things in these type of spaces. How is it for an individual such as Binghamton, as we talked about yesterday with some of his access issues to these type of spaces, how he's able to talk about these things? He doesn't feel worthy to be able to talk about his disabled experience because it's so different from everything else. It's not as obvious to everybody else. It's a little easier when you have a more physical disability, but even with things such as me and Sarah Beth both have bipolar, it's very difficult for us to be able to talk about how this influences types of debates. We always have certain ways where we say this is good enough and not good enough. We're always trying to beat ourselves to these types of norms. I don't think the 1NC is able to do that. They also and the overall changes that exist are still taken. There was no quiet room in USC. They still say maybe something that's good at one point, but it's not always there. The only way is to accept that they hate us and to throw it outside. We can't. And like, even if you look, like, even here at the USC, at the quiet room here, it's still hard for individuals who are in other buildings to be able to get there with demanding ground, which means I don't think any of the 1AC axis of inclusivity is ever going to be able to resolve the things that we're always playing on their terms, and they're always going to take it away from us because it's not productive enough for them, it's not good enough, it costs too much money, and we actually have to go on specific ways and ask them for these things instead of them positing around us and being able to listen to us in the first place. They say that Richter evidence is about their inclusion, but that is not what Zach's talking about at all. I don't think that Zach would be actually fairly against that. We need to realize that things will never be here for us, that his stuttering and the fact that he told that his form of debate was never recognized, and people could not accept that you take 30 seconds or more for a syllable would not be recognized because of forms of debate through speaker points and other sort of positive practices. They say that's a status quo, but I think that is indicative of their form of debate, how they're always trying to have this liberal inclusion within forms of debate. This is not necessarily saying that we should be getting rid of debate. I think that that characterization is wrong. I think that we are just saying that there is a type of debate that needs to be pivoted. This type of community that is happening now through the inclusion needs to not exist, but we need to recognize that we pivot the community around us instead of them, but instead of us pivoting around them.
This card is also definitely not about loving everyone.
Yeah, and the Zach Richter card is not about loving anyone, it's loving everyone, it's recognizing the type of problems that happen and calling them out for it. I think that is that's indicative of Zach's personality. We also need to be able to understand that we need to be able to work against these things, not just allow them to work on our terms. And we also have to, in order for any of the type of claims that 1AC has, we have to prove success in debate for them to understand and for them to meet them on their terms. The only fact that Northwestern even begins to listen, or any of their teams, is because of success instead of our individual experiences. Means they no longer see us as individuals, but just see us as, oh, this person could possibly beat me. I have to start looking at their types of arguments. Means they never understand the way that they are able to engage. I think that also the characterization of the 2AC cross-like that we will never be able to have other terms understand is also kind of damning here, that we always have to work on their terms, but they never have to work on ours, and we're always forced to stop being ourselves. I think this is also what the Richter evidence makes also with psychological claim, or psychological violence, that we always have to work on their terms. You have to change ourselves, make yourself better, try and strive for this ableist norm you will never meet, but they never have to come down to understand us because they're too much for us, and we will never be able to have these changes. And I also think that 1AC is not able to, that the 1AC is always allowing for a form of debate that allows this debate to paternalize us and see us that we always have to come down to help us. Look how good we were to help you in this debate. Doesn't matter if we did it in another debate, we were doing it in this one to help you be more accessible instead of trying to have the overall structures help you there. On to the permutation. I think that we were pretty clear with March 2 and C that we are disability negativity. I'm not sure how this works with the 1AC inclusion arguments when we are rejecting the very notions of inclusion as them being inherently problematic, especially with the Cohen and Rottenberg arguments that their forms of accessibility and inclusion are always problematic because they always posit the outside other. And I think the links that we are reading here in the analysis above do a pretty good job of understanding that these forms of inclusion are problematic. And the permutation is mere inclusion, which resists on normalization on certain norms. Campbell 10. Normalization hinders on the belief that disabled people have become discrete minority rather than a hybrid. Significant part of the vital population to claim inclusion must have a permanent undercohort of the excluded. To claim one's identity must done in reference to what is distinguished. Discourse on tolerance provides an impression of inclusion, but it results in identity management. In effect, bodies become sites for contestation and political concentration. Disabled individuals, disabled people have decades to the past to integrate to engage in both emotional and personal management, become the ideal employee neighbor. Current approaches in social inclusion insist on unhinging the disability from the person. Disability becomes more the real ontological consequence of living with impairment, which I think Mark's analysis of that as having to become the super-crep in order to have any type of access is probably indicative there. And the impairment is also a form of homo-nationalism, propping up the system as it points to how well we can create specific identities while eliminating those from the peripheries. McGruer 10. Dangers can circulate around disability. Yes, that's who we are as people. Look to the fairness we treat our minorities. Minoritized citizenry also probably goes to minorities and citizenries in the Sieber's argument. As the targeting of other populations for quarantine and death, securitization and valorization of certain queer subject homo-nationalism, that securitization ultimately connected to a subject that's marked as excessive and essentially targeted for death or assimilation. The crip theory of sexuality they insist on seeking theory of rights and pleasures while being worried about how these might be discursively positioned around the state. The potential use of disability and sex to shore up who we are can and who we can will coexist with the panic that present residual and dominant discourses. Still close to his position disability. Yeah, hold on.